The game drought of 2022 is finally over, and we bust in the new year with a giant list of games coming out in the first 2 months. But one leads the charge and aims to be the first big hit of the season. But does it actually hit that mark? Hey there friends, it's Kodiak here, welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're diving into Forspoken to find out if it's worth your time. Before we get into the meat of the video, we definitely want to thank our partners over at Square Enix for providing us with a launch day key for PC. We were a bit surprised that PC keys weren't given out in advance with the rest of the console keys, but this does lead into the first topic we want to touch on. I'm sure by now you've seen the countless posts about the game's PC requirements. We expected them to be pretty beefy with a high resolution and pumped up graphical playthrough, but nothing like what we got. The spec sheet was revealed super close to the game's release, and to our knowledge, PC reviewers were given codes only on release day. Now to be clear, there's nothing wrong with this approach, and when you can provide review keys for all your systems in a similar fashion, it's a level playing field. But to gate keys to one particular platform is a bit of a head scratcher. This whole set of circumstances screams PC game optimization issues and damage control. So let's check out the PC requirements for a minimally viable experience. These are probably specs you have if you've built a computer in the last 5 years, so it's not an outrageous requirement, but keep in mind, this is the bare minimum and only gets you to 720p and 30 frames per second. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, you can pretty much bet this won't apply to a majority of players out there. You may have these if you paid for a premium rig and built your system in the last several months, but it is just out of touch for an average player. But at the end of the day, that will supposedly get you 4K at 60 FPS. Now, for full transparency, we're fortunate enough to have systems that can accommodate most of the game's requirements. The 20 hours we played were captured on a PC running a Ryzen 9 5900X, an NVIDIA GTX 3090, and 32 gigabytes of RAM. We juiced the settings to max, including 4K, and we saw on average 30 to 40 FPS, which was still perfectly playable, and we didn't encounter any major lag or graphical issues. That being said, this won't be a lot of players' experience on PC, and it's unfortunate to see the development team lay out a set of requirements that automatically thins the player base right off the bat, or at the very least, drastically diminishes a high-fidelity experience. With the technical stuff out of the way, we can finally jump in and talk about the game. Forspoken puts us in the shoes of Frey Holland, a 21-year-old New Yorker in trouble with the law and just down on life in general. The game brings you into the fold through various opening cutscenes, along with a few interactable moments in between to get you familiarized with the controls, the HUD, and other gameplay details in a bite-sized experience. Right after this intro is when things get super frustrating. Over the course of the next hour, you're stuck in a cutscene and awkward gameplay loop that interrupts your play experience almost every 30 seconds. Now, I'm not joking. No sooner do you get moving after a long series of cutscenes, the game takes over again and explains more of the story or introduces a simple mechanic. For instance, here I am sitting through a bunch of dialogue and cutscenes before I can regain control of my character. Then I climb the ladder only for there to be another cutscene. This is just straight up padding. There's no value add allowing me to control my character for 5 seconds only to take it away, and in fact, I found this to be even more frustrating than if the team had just presented everything in one seamless experience. There were several sequences that could have easily been dialogue as your character was moving in the world, but the team for some reason decided to stop the gameplay and make you watch cutscene after cutscene. For the sake of this video, I actually started documenting the amount of time I was in cutscenes versus playing the game. In my first 23 minutes alone, I recorded a whopping 3 minutes and 39 seconds of time I actually had control over my character. If you average it out, I was interrupted by a cutscene or a forced mechanic every 45 seconds. Talk about a bad first impression. I'd like to say the rest of the game was different, but I'm sad to report it wasn't. If you simply follow the story, the majority of your playtime is in this restrictive and non-interactive state, which is a huge barrier to most players and super demotivating to push through. When you get your hands on a new game, you want to play it, not watch it. Now to counter this, I can say the game absolutely has some great story moments that they do deliver well, but it's as if those isolated moments were created by a completely different team. In those moments, the pacing was great and gave me just the right amount of info I needed to understand what was going on without breaking the immersion, but it was a consistently inconsistent experience. Let's jump into arguably the biggest feature of the game, the open world. Like many games, the open world concept is heavily relied on to fill gaps between story moments and allow the player to explore to their heart's content. Forspoken doesn't change up that formula and falls into a classic open world pitfall: pad out the content and run up the game time. The map and world team do a fantastic job creating the land of Athia. The visuals in the world were excellent, offering several different biomes to explore and various terrains to test out your magical parkour, and more than enough points of interest and collectibles. You could spend tens of hours going through this map to visit every camp, collect every chest, and explore all there is to do. If you're a true completionist, this is the part of the experience for you. While exploring, you'll run across a ton of activities, but arguably the most essential are the refugee buildings found throughout the map. These serve as a chance to rest and regain health and double as a quick travel location point. In addition, they contain consumables to stock up on, a crafting station, and sometimes a logbook that displays new locations on the map, often being the next refugee site to visit. A second fast travel point are the Belfry Towers. When activated, they clear the fog of war and add points to the map in that particular area, which you can then observe from a bird's eye view and choose where to go next. In terms of content loops, we're really talking about two major things here: labyrinths and monuments. Monuments are scenarios and challenges that you're tasked to complete within a time limit. Defend the villagers, kill the enemies, collect the things, you get the idea. These are definitely challenging and grant appropriate rewards based on your completion percentage. Labyrinths, on the other hand, are essentially mini-dungeons. You'll venture into the unknown and brave the maze, face numerous enemies, and attempt to find the secrets held within. Neither of these were revolutionary in their implementation, but they offer a change from navigating the open world nonetheless. Scattered everywhere, and I do literally mean everywhere, are chests. I think we all love discovering those secret chests within a game, but here, there's actually nothing secret or to discover. You can throw a stone in any direction and probably hit one. The team even went as far to show you where all of these chests are on a map once you reveal that area. The objective here doesn't seem to task you with finding them, rather the challenge is getting to them. These are often placed on high earthen pillars, guarded by mobs, or located in a hard-to-reach area, but oftentimes they're just out in the open with no challenge at all. While I do love the feeling of opening a chest, I think most people do, these are literally rubber-stamped assets placed everywhere, clearly for filler and only offering basic crafting materials and sometimes the rare object. These are far from engaging, and I would have loved to see something much more unique and fulfilling in its implementation. Littered throughout the rest of the map are generic objectives: to go clear an area of enemies, to defeat a difficult world boss. Again, filler content and not much reward. But speaking of rewards, the team decided to show you right on the map what the objective offers for completion. We can clearly see this POI rewards a necklace, and another grants mana, and another XP. Honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about this. Do I like that the game respects my time enough to tell me what to expect in advance? For sure. But do I hate that the mystery of a random drop is gone? Yeah, kinda. Ultimately, this comes down to the individual player, which is why I definitely want to know how you all feel about this system. Let me know in the comments. Side quests, or as the game dubs them, detours, are the last major piece to the world that I want to bring up. I'll be honest, I only did a few of these and they were not at all engaging. There was a lot of walking around, talking to NPCs, collecting this or that resource, go to ABC destination and defeat XYZ enemy, but nothing that enhanced the story or enriched my experience. All of this is to say there's a ton to do in the world. However, a lot of this is rubber stamped and clearly implemented to pad out the game time and extend how long you're playing Forspoken. It's that simple. I'd even go so far as to say that once you've visited a small area, those same activities are simply copied to other areas with very slight variations, even down to the enemies, which are just reskinned mobs that have the same moveset, just packed with more health or more damage. Does it look good? Absolutely, but once I understood the lack of uniqueness throughout the entire game, it really became just another chore to collect enough items to dump into my character's progression so I could take on the next challenge, and that's not something that kept me engaged for very long. Alright, let's talk about a big draw to RPGs, gear and crafting. Well, there's not much to talk about. We essentially have three main pieces of gear: cloaks, necklaces, and nails. Now, I'll give it to the devs, I have never seen nails as a slottable gear option, and this was actually a really unique implementation and appropriate for the character and story. You'll obtain gear from quests, world objectives, and story completion. Each item has basic stats and up to 3 customizable enhancement slots, and then each piece of gear can be upgraded in level. Upgrades are done at crafting stations, which are located in every refugee you visit. Here, you'll also have the option to craft potions and increase your medicine and material bags. Every upgrade or crafted material requires some sort of reagent that can be found while exploring the world. Each time you visit a new refugee's crafting station, you also unlock a few new traits as options to add to your gear. Look, you all know I am a huge fan of systems that impact gameplay, so I was super disappointed to discover everything here is just a stat dump. There don't appear to be any gameplay altering options. You're limited to boosts like plus stat modifiers and minor status effect alterations, but not much else. In this case, you can simply just slot whatever gives you the biggest buff, and while that's fine, it's incredibly boring and uninspiring. The sole purpose of the system is to build out a character to take on harder enemies and objectives. Overall, it doesn't change the experience, and in my opinion, the whole gearing system was a big generic miss. Let's shift gears and talk about my absolute favorite part of the game and what was arguably advertised the most: combat and the magical parkour. These mechanics and overall systems actually felt really great. In fact, it's quite obvious this is where the majority of development time went. In comparison, it made the rest of the game feel like a distant afterthought. You gain your parkour abilities super early on in the game, allowing you to use them to explore and feel that sweet freedom of movement coming out of all of those cutscenes. The team did an incredible job making you feel like you were actually flowing effortlessly through the environment. Every potential obstacle is used to enhance this system, even down to the enemies themselves, using them to vault around and reposition on a dime to get the biggest advantage in combat. I truly never felt like this system or the environment was working against me. It just worked. Your combat abilities are spread across 4 different trees of magic that you obtain as you complete various parts of the story. These are simply called out as purple, red, blue, and green trees. Don't worry, we're not going to go into any spoilers, but I will say I did enjoy the way we got to discover each part of that system. It was actually well paced and implemented in a way that made sense and didn't feel forced. Each tree dabbles in a field or element of magic that certain enemies are either vulnerable, neutral, or resistant to. Fortunately, you do have full flexibility to switch between the trees at will at any point, including during combat. This is a great way to make multiple spell kits available without overburdening the player to keep track of dozens of keybinds. Simply swap to the tree you want and use your existing keybinds and select the spell to rain down hell on your enemy. Each tree feels unique, and sprinkle in your parkour abilities for added effect. For example, the charge ability rushes you forward, staggers your enemy, and you vault backwards, allowing you to reposition for your next attack or make a quick getaway. With a little understanding, it begs the question, how does building out these trees feel? I'm happy to report it feels pretty dang good. I never felt forced to make a decision I didn't want to. As you progress through the world and complete objectives, you accumulate mana points. These are your currency to unlock each skill that has an associated cost. Once unlocked, most skills are able to be refunded, which is a great feature that allows you to spend points to try out all the abilities, and if it's not something you enjoy, you get your mana back to spend somewhere else. This is a great quality of life feature that respects your time and doesn't punish you for making a commitment, albeit a temporary one. Now, enhancing skills is a little different. Remember the refugee buildings we've been talking about? Well, each contains a spell crafting station as well. Here is where you target specific abilities to hone and upgrade. I did really like this system. You get to target abilities you actually use and enjoy and ignore what you don't. The system gives you objectives to complete and clearly informs you what the upgrade will do. For instance, here I want to upgrade my bind ability. To do so, I need to bind enemies and then use some other abilities' charged features to attack them from behind. Once the objective is complete, I'll unlock added effect duration and a bump to my purple magic. This is a great way to expose you to using abilities in combination with one another, and I really love the way the team lets you focus on something you actually want to enhance, not needlessly forcing you to slog your way through things to eventually get to what you want. You know that feeling when you use a weapon or ability in a game and it just leaves you feeling a bit meh? Yeah, I didn't get that here. The combat was great and flowed seamlessly with the movement of your character, and the spells actually felt impactful. And that's a great nod to just how well the team crafted these abilities and really spent time making the system feel cohesive and ultimately an extension of your playstyle. I do have one critique, and that's about these hidden spells. In order to open these up, you have to find these founts throughout the world. The system is simple: search and interact. There's no gameplay once you find them and no further depth to unlocking it. You jump into the fount and the ability is now yours. It's a super shallow method the team chose to implement, and here and again, more padding. In terms of enhancing your spells, while simple stat boosts aren't really that appealing to me, I don't mind it so much in this system. There is plenty of variety to change up slotted spells, and I had a bunch of options to choose from. I'm not going to gush that the system did anything new, but all in all, it was fun to interact with. Okay, let's touch on just a couple small things that we wanted to highlight. Before the game launched, we saw plenty of critiques on the voice acting. I want to be very clear. The voice acting is actually great. You can tell the actors were directed and they do an exceptional job at delivering these lines. The characters were convincing and you could feel the emotion through their delivery. It's the writing that was the issue. While the delivery of a line was great, the line itself often seemed out of place, forced, or just straight up awkward. The main character has a lot of inner dialogue that is made external, and this kind of writing just doesn't work. There are plenty of games that convey a character's inner thoughts in a way that still drives the story forward, but Forspoken is not one of those games. I also think it's worth mentioning we didn't encounter any real bugs or broken systems during our playthrough. The systems advertised were all there and seemed complete. This was actually refreshing, as many of today's gaming experiences are littered with half-baked products that got shipped out way earlier than they should have. Obviously, this was a big concern with us because of the last-minute PC key and computer spec recommendations, but it didn't end up being a factor. Now, one final and major criticism I have, again, is around the pacing of some important story moments. This frustration just kept coming back like a bad cold. Like we touched on in the beginning, several major story sections were just unnecessarily padded, having us jumping from cutscene to cutscene, giving you control for just a few seconds only to engage in another cutscene. A simple enemy fight is thrown in once in a blue moon as a clear indication the team thought they needed to add something in there to break this up, but that should have been an obvious flag to rework the delivery as a whole. Nothing here was meaningful, and as these delivery methods dragged out, I became less and less interested in the story that they were telling, because it wasn't fun or engaging, quite the opposite. This was a massive miss for the game and really sealed the deal on our overall impressions. At the end of the day, whenever we play any game, we want our playtime to be meaningful and ultimately enjoyable. Forspoken delivers some things really well. I had plenty of fun as I ran across the world, for example, but the longer I played, the more I realized I'd seen all of this multiple times over and had no real desire to see much more of the same. The story may have been decent, but it was forcefully oversaturated with cutscenes that bloated my experience from top to bottom, ultimately killing my desire to continue playing. Upon finishing the game, I was just glad it was over, and coming in at the whopping AAA price of $70, and with all the blatant padding and rubber stamping throughout, we can only conclude that no, Forspoken is not worth your time. We appreciate you all for sticking with us, and hopefully you found this valuable. As always, we love hearing from you in the comments and do our best to reply to as many of you as possible, so let us know what you thought. If you played the game and have some additional comments you'd like to add or even disagree with some of our observations, we'd love to hear all about it. I also want to invite you to our Legacy Gaming community on Discord. We recently revamped our entire server, and as a home to nearly 20,000 members, it's a great place to hang out, talk about games, win free stuff, group up, you name it. As always, I'll leave that link in the description below. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.